Think about what this means for your everyday life. Every emotion you feel is not just a reaction, it's a signal. Every conflict is not just a problem, it's a mirror revealing something within you. Every desire is not just a longing, it's a direction pointing toward something meaningful. Awakening doesn't make life easier, but richer. It transforms confusion into understanding, suffering into wisdom, limitation into possibility. Huxley warned, the greatest danger in life isn't pain, but unconsciousness. A person can endure hardship and still grow, but a person who moves through life unaware cannot truly live. He believed unconsciousness breeds fear, division, emptiness. It leads people to seek fulfillment in external things, status, approval, possessions, while ignoring the deeper hunger of the soul. And he argued society, with all its distractions and pressures, encourages this sleep-like state. Let me ask you, how many moments of your life have passed without your full presence? How many conversations, opportunities, experiences have slipped through your fingers because your mind was elsewhere? How often have you been physically present but mentally absent, lost in thought? Worry, routine. Awakening means reclaiming these moments. It means learning to inhabit your life, not just endure it. Huxley believed awakening begins with attention. When you observe your thoughts without being controlled by them, you awaken. When you recognize the patterns shaping your behavior, you awaken. When you face your emotions with honesty instead of resistance, you awaken. And when you begin to act from awareness rather than habit, the world around you changes because you have changed. This perspective aligns with philosopher David Bohm, who described thought as a system that operates automatically unless we learn to observe it. It echoes Eckhart Tolle, who said presence is the gateway to transformation. And it's supported by modern research in mindfulness, neuroscience, and psychology, all pointing to the same conclusion. The ability to observe the mind is the foundation of mental freedom. But Huxley went further. He believed awakening is not just psychological, it's spiritual. Not in the sense of dogma, but of recognizing the profound interconnectedness of all life. He argued that when awareness expands, people begin to see themselves not as isolated individuals but as expressions of a greater whole. Compassion deepens. Judgment softens. Meaning becomes clearer. Life in all its complexity begins to feel like an unfolding journey, not a chaotic series of events. This insight carries enormous implications. When you awaken to your inner world, the outer world changes. You communicate differently, love differently, work differently, understand differently. You begin to see that your thoughts, perceptions, and actions ripple outward, shaping everything around you. You become not just a participant in life, but a conscious creator of it. And this leads to Huxley's final message. This connects to psychologist Kristin Neff, who showed that self-compassion increases motivation, resilience, and emotional balance. Many think self-compassion is weakness, but research proves it's a form of inner strength. Imagine speaking to yourself not as a judge, but as a mentor, offering understanding instead of punishment, patience instead of pressure, curiosity instead of shame. How different would your life be if your inner voice supported you instead of sabotaging you? This brings us to one of Huxley's most beautiful ideas, the expansion of consciousness. He believed that as people become more aware, they perceive life with greater depth and tenderness. Their relationships become more authentic. Their decisions align with their values. Their fears lose their grip. Their clarity sharpens. In this expanded state, individuals are no longer controlled by unconscious patterns. They become conscious creators of their lives. And here, transformation becomes possible. When awareness expands, identity softens. When identity softens, possibilities widen. When possibilities widen, life becomes a landscape of meaning, not a maze of confusion. At this stage, you begin to understand what Huxley meant. The purpose of life is not to escape reality, but to embrace it with eyes fully open. In the next and final part, we uncover the most important insight of all, the revelation that ties together everything Huxley believed about consciousness, identity, suffering, and human potential. It's powerful enough to reshape how you view life itself. If you're ready for the final section, just let me know. Throughout his life, Huxley returned again and again to one central idea. The greatest challenge of being human is learning to perceive reality clearly, not partially, not through the filters of fear or desire, but with full awareness. And now, after exploring his insights on perception, identity, suffering, and consciousness, we arrive at the most powerful truth he believed about life, one capable of shifting the foundations of how you understand yourself and the world. To approach this final insight, imagine your mind as a vast landscape. Some areas are familiar, habits, memories, preferences. Other areas are unknown, potential unexplored emotions, possibilities never dared. Huxley believed most people live only on the familiar ground, restricted not by external circumstances, but by fear of venturing into the unexplored regions of themselves. But here lies his ultimate message. The purpose of life is to wake up. For Huxley, awakening meant expanding your awareness until you recognize you are more than your thoughts, more than your beliefs, more than the identity you inherited or constructed. Awakening means stepping beyond the reducing valve of the mind, seeing reality with greater clarity, depth, and compassion. It means realizing consciousness is not passive, it's an active force shaping everything you perceive. A person may cling to insecurity because it feels known, to self-doubt because it's become part of their inner narrative, to limiting beliefs, not because they're true, but because they feel safe. This leads to a profound question. Who would you be if you stopped believing every thought you have about yourself? Huxley argued the real self exists not in the stories of the past, but in the awareness observing those stories. When you can step back and watch your thoughts, rather than be controlled by them, you open the door to transformation. This echoes Alan Watts, who described the self as a process, not an object, and Jiddu Krishnamurti, who insisted freedom begins when we observe ourselves without judgment or attachment. Reflect. How often do you feel trapped not by circumstances, but by your own mind? How many opportunities have you abandoned because the voice inside whispered, "You cannot"? How many dreams have you postponed because you believed you weren't ready, capable, worthy? Huxley understood the greatest prison isn't built of walls, but of assumptions. And these assumptions can be dismantled the moment you choose to question them. Another central theme in Huxley's work, the nature of suffering. He believed suffering becomes unbearable when we resist, deny or escape it through distraction. But when observed with clarity, it becomes a source of insight. He echoed Viktor Frankl, who discovered through unimaginable hardship that humans can choose the meaning they assign to their experiences, and Friedrich Nietzsche, who wrote, "Those who have a strong enough why can endure almost any how." Imagine viewing your struggles not as obstacles, but as teachers. What if every setback held a message about your boundaries, expectations, or hidden strengths? What if pain contained information essential to your growth? Huxley suggested suffering becomes transformative when we stop fighting it and begin listening to it. It's a doorway, not a barrier. Yet modern life teaches us to avoid discomfort at all costs. Constant entertainment, noise, stimulation shield us from our inner world. Huxley warned, this avoidance weakens emotional resilience. When you never sit with your emotions, you never learn to understand them. When you never face your fears, they continue to control you. When you numb your pain, you also numb your capacity for joy. Ask yourself honestly, when was the last time you allowed yourself to feel deeply? When was the last time you sat with grief, anger, or loneliness long enough to understand its origins? Emotional intelligence begins with presence, and presence requires courage. Huxley believed the path to liberation is a path of awareness, a conscious, deliberate willingness to look inward. But he also believed awareness must be grounded in compassion. Without compassion, introspection becomes self-criticism. With compassion, it becomes healing. Imagine entering a conflict and asking, what part of me is being triggered? Facing a challenge and asking, what belief is shaping my perception of this moment? These simple questions have the power to dismantle the illusions that limit your potential. Huxley also emphasized humility in the search for truth. He argued the greatest obstacle to clarity is the belief that we already understand. Certainty can become a cage. When you believe you know yourself fully, you stop exploring. When you believe your worldview is complete, you stop learning. When you believe your narrative is final, you stop growing. Huxley encouraged lifelong study of your own consciousness, always willing to question, revise, expand. This aligns with Socrates, who said true wisdom begins with acknowledging how little we know. It mirrors modern cognitive science, which shows the mind is full of biases, shortcuts that distort perception without our awareness. Recognizing this isn't discouraging, it's empowering. It frees us from the illusion of perfection and opens the door to continuous evolution. As we continue, reflect deeply. What beliefs have you inherited that no longer serve you? What emotions repeatedly shape your decisions? What fears silently direct your path? Your life isn't shaped only by what you experience, but by the meanings you create. And every meaning can be redefined. We're moving toward insights that reveal how identity is formed, how suffering can be transformed, and how awareness can change your existence. Remember, the most powerful revelation awaits at the end. Huxley believed one of the greatest illusions of life is the illusion of a fixed identity. He argued people cling to labels, roles, narratives, as if they were solid truths, when in reality, they're fluid constructions shaped by experience, memory, and perception. Imagine standing before a mirror, not to see your reflection, but to observe the invisible structure behind it. The accumulated layers of beliefs, expectations, emotional experiences silently defining how you behave. Think how often you say, "This is who I am," without realizing your sense of self might be just a temporary arrangement of stories repeated for years. Huxley suggested identity is not discovered, it's created. And because it's created, it can also be recreated. This resonates with Erik Erikson, who described human development as a continuous transformation of the self, and Carol Dweck, who emphasized the power of a growth mindset. But Huxley added something crucial. Unlocking identity requires a radical willingness to let go of certainty, and letting go is often the hardest step. Think about your relationship with your identity. How many times have you felt your past defines you? How often do you believe you must remain consistent with who you were yesterday? Huxley believed the fear of change is one of the greatest barriers to freedom. The mind prefers the comfort of familiarity, even when that familiarity creates suffering. He described human consciousness as a narrow opening that filters an overwhelming universe of possibilities into a manageable stream of experiences. This idea resonated with philosopher Henry Bergson, who said perception is a selective function designed to help us survive, not to reveal truth. Modern neuroscience confirms this. The brain ignores most incoming information, spotlighting only what fits our internal models. But what happens when the internal model is flawed? When those filters are shaped by fear, trauma, or cultural conditioning? Huxley believed this is where most human suffering originates, not from life itself, but from the stories the mind tells in response to life. This raises a difficult but liberating question. How much of your pain comes from what happened? And how much comes from the interpretation you gave it? Think of a moment when you felt misunderstood, rejected, or discouraged. How quickly did your mind form a narrative? Perhaps, "I'm not good enough. This always happens to me. I'll never change." These are not objective facts. They're meaning-making strategies formed over years of repetition. Carl Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Huxley embraced this truth. Most people mistake their inherited conditioning for identity. This invites reflection. How often have you repeated a behavior you consciously wanted to change? How often have you known what was good for you, yet felt unable to act on it? The struggle between intention and action isn't weakness. It's evidence that deeper layers of the mind are at work. Huxley believed understanding these layers is the first step toward true freedom. He also warned, modern society pulls people away from introspection, not through force, but through distraction. He predicted the future wouldn't silence the individual with oppression but seduce them with noise, comfort, entertainment, and constant stimulation that numb the desire to ask deeper questions. This echoes psychologist Barry Schwartz, who showed how excessive choices create anxiety rather than freedom, and philosopher Byung-Chul Han, who argues the modern world traps people in cycles of productivity and superficial engagement. Think about your relationship with silence. When was the last time you sat quietly with your thoughts? When was the last time you faced your emotions without reaching for your phone, a distraction, or the next obligation? Introspection is uncomfortable because it demands honesty, but it's in that honesty that transformation begins. Huxley believed awareness is the antidote to unconscious living. Not awareness as an abstract idea, but as a daily practice. Observing your reactions, noticing your assumptions, questioning your emotional triggers. Imagine how different your life could become if you stopped reacting from habit and began responding from consciousness. But Huxley went further. He warned modern societies distract people from internal awakening by overwhelming them with comfort, entertainment, and noise. Think about your daily life. How often do you feel pulled in 1,000 directions, notifications, responsibilities, expectations, a constant stream of information demanding attention? How often do you end the day feeling mentally drained but not truly fulfilled? Huxley predicted this emotional fatigue decades before it became the defining symptom of modern existence. He warned, when individuals lose control of their attention, they lose control of their lives. So let me ask you directly, how much of your attention do you truly command? When was the last time you paused to observe your own thoughts without judgment? When was the last time you questioned the origins of your fears, goals, or self-image? Huxley believed the greatest journey a person can take is inward, the journey toward understanding oneself with honesty and courage. This aligns with thinkers like Kierkegaard, who said self-reflection is essential for freedom, and Maslow, who described self-actualization as the highest human need. These thinkers, though separated by decades, all pointed to the same truth. Meaning is not given, it's discovered within. But Huxley's perspective was also deeply compassionate. He recognized humans suffer not only from external circumstances, but from the internal stories they carry. Stories of inadequacy, guilt, fear, stories inherited from childhood, society, or painful experiences never fully understood. He believed healing begins when we recognize these stories are not final truths, but interpretations we have the power to rewrite. Think about your own life. What story have you been telling yourself? What version of you do you believe in? And is that version truly aligned with your potential? What would happen if you allowed yourself to question the narrative you've been living? This is only the beginning. Ahead, we'll dive deeper into Huxley's insights on identity, suffering, meaning, and the invisible structures shaping human behavior. With each step, we'll build toward a final transformative conclusion, one that has the power to change how you see life itself. Huxley believed one of humanity's greatest misunderstandings is the idea that life is something happening to us rather than something happening through us. We often behave like spectators in our own existence, reacting automatically without questioning the origins of our impulses. Imagine observing your life as if it were a movie playing before you. Notice the patterns repeating in your relationships, the emotional reactions that appear without warning, the beliefs you carry without knowing why. Huxley insisted these aren't coincidences. They're the architecture of the unconscious mind, shaping your reality from the inside out. To understand this, we must explore his most powerful idea, the reducing valve. Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that everything you thought you understood about life was only a thin layer of a much deeper and more complex reality. Beneath your daily routine, beliefs, fears, even your dreams, there exists an entire universe of meaning waiting to be uncovered. Think for a moment. How profoundly could your life change if you had access to the insights of one of the sharpest minds of the 20th century? Today, we step into the world of Aldous Huxley, a thinker who challenged society, confronted illusions, and invited humanity to see beyond the surface. And I promise you this, the final insight we'll reach together is the most powerful of all. Huxley believed much of what we call reality is a mental construction shaped by conditioning. He wrote extensively about how societies mold individuals through culture, education, and subtle persuasion. But he also believed every human carries the potential to awaken, to break free from inherited patterns and perceive life with far greater clarity. So let me ask you something essential. How much of the person you are today is the result of conscious choice? And how much is shaped by unconscious influences you've never questioned? If you're drawn to deep philosophical reflections, psychological insights, and the search for personal growth, take a moment to subscribe, like, comment, and share this video. What we'll explore has the power to transform how you understand yourself, your relationships, and the hidden forces shaping your daily life. The ideas we unravel aren't just intellectually stimulating, they're practical tools that can shift the direction of your inner journey. Huxley was fascinated by the limitations of human perception. Drawing from psychology and neuroscience, he argued the mind filters reality to prevent overload. Psychologist William James suggested, consciousness can receive far more than we normally access. Huxley built on this. Society narrows our perception to maintain order. Imagine this. Your experience of life isn't the full picture, but a reduced version. An edited summary constructed by your brain to keep you functional. If that's true, consider the consequences. Your fears may be products of cognitive habits. Your insecurities may come from external voices. Your limitations may be illusions constricting a broader potential. This leads to a challenging question. What would you discover about yourself if you dared to look beyond your mental filters? What truths about your life, desires, or suffering might suddenly become visible? Throughout his writings, Huxley emphasized that true freedom begins internally. While many seek liberation through external changes, new jobs, relationships, environments, the real transformation happens when you confront the beliefs and narratives governing your mind. Modern psychologists like Carl Rogers and Viktor Frankl later supported this. Authentic change comes from self-awareness and responsibility. The quality of your consciousness determines the quality of your life. Not your circumstances, not your past, not your external achievements. Your consciousness, the way you interpret, respond, and make meaning of the world. A person with awareness can find depth in an ordinary moment. A person without awareness can miss the beauty right in front of them. Awakening turns existence into experience. It transforms living into being alive. Think about your own life. How many times have you waited for something external to change so you could feel fulfilled? How often have you believed happiness was something to be achieved rather than cultivated? Huxley challenges this belief directly. He says the inner journey isn't separate from the outer one. It's the foundation of it. The clearer your mind, the clearer your path. The deeper your awareness, the deeper your relationships. The more awake you are, the more meaningful your existence becomes. As this journey reaches its final insight, I invite you to reflect. The answers you seek are not outside. You're looking within, the depth of your own awareness. Huxley believed humans possess extraordinary capacity for growth, transformation, and understanding. But this capacity awakens only when we dare to look beyond the familiar, the comfortable, the habitual. The question now is, will you awaken to your own life? Imagine what could happen if you committed to observing your thoughts more consciously. Imagine how your relationships might change if you listened with full presence. Imagine how your sense of purpose might shift if you paid attention to your deepest desires rather than your fears. These aren't abstract ideals. They're practical steps shaping your life from this moment forward. Huxley once wrote, "Experience is not what happens to a person, but what a person does with what happens to them." This is the essence of awakening. Life doesn't become meaningful automatically. Meaning is created through awareness, through interpretation, through the choices you make about who you want to become. And now as we close, let this final thought remain with you. Your life expands in direct proportion to your willingness to perceive it clearly. When you dare to look deeply, you unlock the fullness of your humanity. You step into a richer, more conscious, more authentic existence, and you begin to live not by default but by design. This is the message Huxley wanted us to understand, not just think about, but embody, practice, awaken to again and again, to the infinite possibilities within and around us. May you walk forward from this moment with greater clarity, deeper awareness, and the understanding that the most meaningful journey you'll ever take is the journey into yourself. Thanks for watching.